A lot of people malign sitting, right? Sitting is the new smoking, but the research does not back it up.
Kind of people are leading by the bad example. Everyone's copying that.
We've culturally lost our way.
I've gone on this posture journey around a year ago. Before I was really this C type.
Trading out a C shape for an S shape spine. And it's not clear which one is better. They're both unhealthy.
What the hell am I doing wrong? Because it doesn't seem to work,
What I teach is a J spine.
I would love just to sit in the right way and this stuff goes away. Like, this is literally the dream scenario.
You might just change the course of your well-being.
Well, honestly, sign me up. All right, Esther, so wonderful having you in the show. First thing first, why has back pain become so common today? And I'm really asking from a personal point of view, because I'm incredibly young still. I haven't really had the chance to really collect a lot of information to actually get back pain, yet I have it, And it's just remarkable that these days, the younger it gets, the more back pain they have, it seems. And I really would like to understand, you're really the expert on this topic. Where is this coming from? Why do we all have this? And the fixing part, we'll discuss a bit later. But first, really the origins, like where does this come from?
Well, I think we've forgotten how to be in our bodies. And why has this happened? And we're talking about modern Western societies. There's been a lot of transplanting of populations, and I live in the US. It's a young country, and people migrated from far away, and even today, even like people don't grow up in a village, and kinesthetic traditions, how to sit, stand, bend, walk, are things you learn by observing those around you. You also learn through the way you're carried as a baby, as a child. So you're modeled and you are molded in a certain way. And that largely determines your architecture. And we've lost these unbroken kinesthetic threads that people in traditional societies and villages and olden times had, where posture and your natural ways of moving just get passed down through the generations. So we've forgotten. That's a big part of it. And then once you have that vacuum, then you are prey to the whims of the fashion industry, like the clothing industry, furniture design. And before you know it, people are being nudged in very unhealthy ways that are not natural, that are fashionable. Think about the flapper era when people were tucking their pelvis, and think about the runway models, and this influences what the rest of the population does. So it's a cultural thing. We've culturally lost our way. Furniture design is wrong. Even clothing is cut wrong. Popular guidelines on how to do fitness are often wrong. And it's worked its way up all the way into the medical texts. Like if you look at the illustrations of a so-called normal human spine, those have gone into a wrong paradigm. So we've really got it wrong at multiple levels. We've lost our way. The signs are pointing the wrong way. So we're profoundly lost.
So it's almost like kind of people are leading by the bad example. Everyone's copying that and it just ends up being not great.
What happens when you have a threshold number of people following a fashion or then you start mistaking what's average for normal and even ideal. And then people are being shepherded in a direction that is the fashion and not really the ideal. They mistake average for normal.
Mm-hmm. Because for me, I've gone on this posture journey around a year ago. Before I was really this C type, that we discussed earlier, right? Where I'm just on my computer, like looking at the screen and kind of to minimize the distance to the screen. Well, that's kind of how the posture went. And what was funny, I felt more or less fine. People, well, my wife told me, you look horrible sitting like this. Really, you should change. It doesn't look great. And I listened to her. So I really tried. And then I tried to go into this upright position. I really tried to focus so incredibly hard every single day. When I sit on my computer, when I drive the car, when I'm walking around, I try. And it might look better, but it hurts like hell. So it's not the good thing yet. So today I really want to kind of get out of this conversation. Well, what the hell am I doing wrong? Because it doesn't seem to work, and what should I do otherwise?
Earlier you made a statement about how younger people seem to be getting increasingly in trouble, and there's truth in that. And if you look at baby car seats, for example, they are C-shaped. And you look at umbrella strollers and other infant furniture, and we are literally molding our babies into a C shape. And then that's what's in their brain, because this is the age at which the human brain learns what sitting means. And we're, in effect, teaching our babies that the way to sit is with the C shape. And then it's not so surprising that when they go to school or they're sitting behind a computer playing video games or whatever, they're replicating that shape. We trained them to do that. And this used to not be the case, so it's the younger folk, it's your generation that is actually suffering the most or will suffer the most because they don't have memory of good posture. We started them off wrong. My book, 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back, used to have a subheading, Remember When It Didn't Hurt. But the younger generation doesn't even remember when it didn't hurt in some sense, I've trained young people and heard them say, I used to play with my Legos for hours and hours, and I didn't even realize that I was hurting. Now, looking back, I realized that I was actually uncomfortable. So yeah, younger people are suffering the most. I think we have gotten really wayward with our infant furniture. And so how to bring it back? So when they do sit in this C shape, parents will typically say things like, sit up straight or pull your shoulders back, which in effect is asking the kid to contract some muscle, the rhomboid muscle or the erector spinae muscles. Those are the long back muscles. And it's not practical to do that all day long. It's also not healthy. So what you're describing, what your wife induced in you was you're trading out a C shape for an S shape spine. And it's not clear which one is better. They're both unhealthy shapes. And what I teach is a J spine. So this is a new paradigm. It's also an old paradigm. Like if you go back 100 years ago or more, this is what you see in the medical texts. It's a J spine. And what do I mean by J? It's not a loopy J. It's a kind of stylized calligraphy J, where the behind is behind. And then up above, it's not that curvy. It's not like an S. So what I'm going to work with you on after the show is to not trade your C spine for an S spine, but rather a J spine.
And is it basically, so I'm trying to put my butt more out and then the top should be straight, right? That's how I imagine the J right now.
It is true that the behind belongs behind. I often joke about this to my students. It's called a behind for a reason. When that phrase was coined, we knew where this part went. Yeah, that's why it's called a behind. But you wouldn't know that watching the runway models. They lead with their pelvis. But it's not the right starting point. When you have been sitting with the C-spine, you don't want to start by remodeling your spine. You first have to prepare it. You first want to lengthen it. And then you want to stabilize the lumbar spine, the part that you've been squishing by sitting up straight.
Yeah.
So you first need to stabilize that before the behind has a chance of going behind from the right place, which is way down low in the spine. It's at the lowest possible joint in the spine. It's called L5S1.
Mm-hmm.
L5 is the last of your lumbar vertebrae. S1 stands for sacrum 1. So it's the top of the sacrum, right? So it's the absolute bottommost joint in your spine. And that's the only place that's really constructed to be curved. And so how do you get your behind? Well, the way we teach it is by learning to walk right. With every step, you want your glutes to be contracting. Yeah,
Okay.
you want to squeeze your bum as your way of propelling forward. You don't want to reach out with the front leg by squeezing your quads. A lot of people walk by reaching the front leg out. It's quad dominant. And you really want your posterior chain, your glutes, your calves, your foot muscles to do the job of propelling you forward. And if you do this right, then you're going to have very toned glutes. Nice to have. No complaints there. But more importantly, your behind will be behind, and that forms like the foundation for the rest of your structure. If you get your foundation correct, so that's your behind, or you can say your pelvis tipped forward, or the term I like to use is anteverted, rotated forward. I use that term because then no one's going to quarrel with me. If I say, like there's a lot of verbiage that has gotten all kinds of meanings, and rather than engage in quarrels with other people who are using those phrases differently, I either make up my own or use an older word like anteverted pelvis that nobody's using. So it means anti-forward, vertare in Latin is rotated, and pelvis means bowl. So there's this bowl at the bottom of your spine, and you want it tipped forward, and that forms the right foundation for your structure. Then the rest can stack well. Your upper body doesn't slump forward. It's critical because a lot of people know their upper body is not right, and they try to strengthen their rhomboids and pull their shoulders back and get all kinds of treatments and adjustments, and they focus on the upper body. But if you don't fix the base, the foundation, you're going to be working forever, and it won't be right. It'll be effort.
Yeah, and that's how it feels right now for me, because literally every 2 weeks I go to the massage. I need it, and I'm trying so hard, and I feel like it's hurting me more than it helps me. And then I kind of was looking for solutions, we also had Kelly Starrett on the podcast, and he basically like a subtle leopard is his book, like a bestseller, right? And the first thing he told me, Enrico, you're not allowed to sit, you have to stand. And I tried that, but it also didn't make me feel good. I literally got a standing desk, and it also didn't fix the problem. And it sounds like you're almost turning that around. You're not saying don't sit. You're just saying, hey, let's fix the base. If you sit that way.
Sit well.
Sit well,
sit
right?
skillfully.
Mm-hmm.
We have two techniques: stretch sitting, stack sitting, go back and forth, and mix it up. Also stand. But a lot of people malign sitting, right? Sitting is the new smoking. Sitting is what kills you, blah, blah, blah. But the research does not back it up. In our society, there's an 85% incidence of back pain. It's a rare person that escapes without having serious enough back pain to have to go and visit their doctor, right? But people who sit to earn a living, and you have to earn your living some way, people who sit do better than people who earn their living some other way, like manual labor or whatever. Those people have even worse statistics. So
that's interesting. I thought it's the opposite, actually.
No, it's you examine the statistics, and sitting, if you really are accurate, sitting protects you from worse stuff happening, is the truth. And there's other evidence, like the Hadza tribals in Africa. They've been studied with sensors all over their bodies. And it turns out they sit an average of 9 hours a day, which is the same as modern people do. And they don't have all these problems with back pain. And my claim is it's because they sit well and we sit terribly. And it is also true that you have to punctuate your sitting with getting up and moving around and so on. You can't just sit like a lump on a log. That will get you in trouble. So sit well and break it up. And then sitting actually is easier to learn than learning to do manual labor well. I mean, we're well designed. We're way better designed than we give ourselves credit for. And we absolutely can do sitting jobs, can do manual labor without getting in trouble. I mean, we've done that for all of our prehistory and history. It's only in recent times that we have these ridiculously high back pain rates. So I tell people to look back in time, to look at other cultures that don't have these kind of problems, to take cheer. It's possible, but we have to learn a few things. We have to tweak the way we do everyday life exercises. People are always looking for an exercise. Give me an exercise. Well, the most important exercises you could possibly do are life exercises. We're sitting and standing and bending and walking all day long. Anyway, by doing small tweaks in how we do those things, we can get big results.
And that's really my hope, because I would love just to sit in the right way and this stuff goes away. Like, this is literally the dream scenario, because I have to sit. I mean, I'm sitting so much and I don't have to, but it's a bulk of my work. We sit a lot, and then I try to kind of substitute that with walking while doing my meetings, or literally working a lot on the phone with my voice, But I don't know. It feels like if we can kind of tackle it at the source, and I can just learn to sit right, it sounds logical to me, that it might work.
A lot of people have to sit. If you're a professional pianist, what are you going to do? Stand at the piano?
Good luck with that.
Right? And if people who were basket weavers, or when people were making skins and pelts and weaving, and there's a lot of professions that have to be done sitting. Are those people then condemned? No, I don't think so. And there's also research showing in a lot of modern corporations, Facebook and Google, people have standing desks available to them. But after about a month, people go right back to sitting. And there's a good reason for that. Sitting is more peaceful. And it turns out that certain kinds of focused thinking happen more easily with sitting than standing. When you're walking around, you can do certain kinds of reflection, but sitting allows you to go deep in a way that standing isn't conducive to. So I don't think we should be maligning sitting. I think sitting, if done well and punctuated with walking, especially walking, because when you sit, even if you sit well, you can enable your psoas muscle in particular to get a bit short. The baseline length of that psoas muscle could get short. And then the natural time to reset that muscle is in walking. Now, that walking has to be done skillfully, with the back leg straightened out and the back heel left on the ground extra long and your glutes firing with every step. Every step could be a psoas stretch. So when you have sat for a spell at your computer, then when you go to the bathroom is the time to reset muscles that might otherwise have gotten short. That's also the time to tone your glutes and create that L5-S1 curve I was talking about. Get your behind. The best way I know is that every step become a rep, for the glutes. And if you are stable enough in the lumbar area and it's not too wobbly from you having stuck out your chest and sitting up straight all the time and making that place weak and curvy, then squeezing your glutes enables your behind to be behind. It kind of mobilizes that joint, even if it has become a bit stiff from you tucking your pelvis, sitting on your imaginary tail, so to speak. That's what a lot of people do in modern times. We tuck our tails. And then we try to make up for that by sticking out our chests. And now we got multiple problems.
It almost sounds like learn to sit right and learn to walk right. And the whole thing is kind of solvable, right?
Those are two biggies, but it also doesn't hurt to learn to bend right and sleep right and lift right and stand right. I mean, basically, what we do all day, every day needs to be done skillfully. I can't dissect one piece from it all, but there is an order in which it makes sense to learn things if we're interested in learning this efficiently. We do have getting your behind is not the first step, because it would sway the back. Even if you did the legit way of squeezing your bum with every step, it would result in a sway. So we have to firm that upper lumbar area up first. And that becomes much easier to do if you have already been stretch lying and stretch sitting, and you've kind of peeled the outer layer of the onion, that compensatory layer of sitting up straight and standing up straight and tensing all those erector spinae muscles. So that's where we like to start. And happily, those early techniques, stretch sitting and stretch lying, are relatively easy to learn.
Now, if I give you the challenge to explain this to our audience, the 8 steps in, I don't know, I want to challenge you. Let's say in 5 sentences each, in super simple terms, what are the 8 things I should do? In what order? If I do these 3 things, which 3 things should I focus on?
Wow.
You could also take more time, of course, but this is really, let's try to create the most practical guide now. What people can actually do.
So it is customized for the person, but most people benefit from beginning with some traction in their spine. So stretch sitting, stretch lying on the back, because that's easy to learn.
So what does that mean, stretch sitting?
So basically, you are putting your back in traction by hooking your back up a little higher against the backrest than usual. So you need something protruding from the backrest. And if you have a fabric chair like we have here, fabric sofa, you could fold a towel or something and create a kind of protrusion. I'm using my pillow here, but you could create something. And we've also created a stretch sit cushion to work in other chairs, like a leather chair or something that would slip
Yeah.
But if it's fabric, you can just stick something behind your mid-back. And then the idea is that you elongate your back and hook your back to that protrusion, right? And now your back is getting stretched. It's a very simple idea, but for some reason, it hasn't, it should be in every chair, really. And so that's a project waiting to happen.
So you're kind of trying to simulate this J shape while sitting. Is that what I'm
This
hearing?
is the flat part of the J.
Okay.
Most people are either C-shaped or they're S-shaped. So their spine is curved excessively one way or the other. Either way, we want to start by stretching them out.
Okay. So kind of make yourself as long as possible.
Yes.
Basically.
And that makes all the subsequent steps much safer.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to start by sticking your bum out and exacerbating what's already a excessive curves, right? So we like to start with traction. And you can get traction most easily by stretch sitting and stretch lying. I mean, people understand that traction is very useful, but they usually go about it in very fancy ways, like, hanging from an inversion table.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty ugly piece of furniture that takes up half your living room. And
it's funny because my mom has one of these actually. And sometimes I see her laying upside down in the living room. It's hilarious.
So it's the right idea.
Okay.
But in my view, it's the wrong extent because, how many minutes are you going to spend hanging upside down?
I mean, to me, it looks completely wrrong. I don't know. There must be a simpler way. Come on.
It's got several problems. It's kind of indiscriminate in where it's putting traction. Like we want traction in spine. We don't need it in the ankles, knees, and hips, right? So that's one problem with it. And I've had at least a couple of students show up after having accidents on their inversion tables. If it's not really a good quality inversion table, if you fall off, that's not a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be damaging. So that's a problem. But also the big problem is that you can't really get enough traction hanging. And it's all dedicated time, right? You have to take time out of your life and hang upside down, or even more contrived way is to go to a person who has a decompression machine. And then, at least in the US, you pay a large number of thousands of dollars to lie on this decompression machine and have a computer put some traction in your back. And so you get maybe 10 sessions. And then what? You're going to go back.
Of course.
So these two ways are a stretch sitting. While you're sitting, by doing this minor modification of your backrest, you can get traction as you sit at your computer, as you watch TV from your sofa, as you're talking to your podcast interviewer.
So what do I do now? So stretch sitting. But do I understand correctly? I basically try to...
behind your back.
But I try to make myself as long as possible, right? This is the notion.
But so here's the common mistake. When people try to make themselves as long as possible, what do? They arch their back. So, but what does that do to the back? It makes it shorter, right? So it's a little counterintuitive that you want to hunch. If you're going to succeed at lengthening your back, you have to actually hunch forward. It's very counterintuitive.
Okay.
Yeah, because most people have trained themselves to stick out their chest and arch their back, but that's a way of compressing everything in there and shortening it. So you have to really use your intellect and curve and hunch. And then additionally, push with your arms. You push the top of you away from the bottom of you. Now here I see you sticking out your chest. You want to stick in your chest. Think angry cat. So you're doing like a crunch.
Like this?
No, curve forward like a crunch. Yes.
Okay.
See, it's very reluctant to go there. And now unroll against the back. It is. And now unroll. So don't stick out your chest on your way back. So stay hunched. And then find the cushion or the stretch sit cushion nubbies or whatever you have back there. And now you're partially hooked there. And now you do a shoulder roll, which will have one at a time. So you're ratcheting the soft tissue back of your shoulders. There you go. That looks nice. Much more commanding right away. Yeah?
Okay.
Not to mention healthier for your discs and your spinal nerves and your muscles that are getting reset to a longer resting length. Lots of good stuff happening on the inside of you when you are partially hanging from the backrest, right? You got some stretch.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Okay.
Because so many, like human discs, after the age of 7, get no circulation. So if you put the same stress on them that caused their damage in the first place, they don't have a way to heal themselves. So by doing this, you're decompressing them. Now they behave like sponges. They can absorb fluids and building blocks from the surrounding tissue and actually heal themselves. So it's a very simple but profound
Good.
helpful.
Feels pretty good, I think, when I just did it, actually. I think I kind of need to practice the movement, a bit to get in this motion and just
I'll
understand.
work with you after we're done.
I would love that,
to
actually.
help
Yes.
you, because on your way back, you drove 5 hours here.
Yeah, we did.
All the way from Switzerland to Germany. Wowza.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give you one of our stretch sit cushions. So on your way back, you can be partially hanging from these little nubbies.
In the car, literally.
Friction. It's
Oh, that's
made for the
lovely.
car originally,
Okay.
but it can be used on any chair. But they're little friction nubbies. Yeah. You can also, if the car seat is fabric, you can also fold a towel and get some stretch.
Yeah.
But when the surface has friction, it sticks very nicely. And then you can be stretching your spine as you're driving.
Okay. I'll have 4 hours or 5 hours to do it.
Traction, that'll do something.
So this is number 1, stretch sitting, which kind of makes sense in my head right now. Like, okay, it felt good. I think I need to practice the movement, of course. But okay, that's number 1. Then what's the second?
So there's another juicy, low-hanging fruit for getting a similar effect, and that's stretch lying. So by strategically placing yourself in your bed with a little traction, at first we tell people to only discipline themselves for 5 minutes. Yeah, because you don't want to create negative associations lying there thinking this is good for me, I need to stay here. So 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's seductively comfortable. We're building familiarity in the brain. And on one of those nights, the brain says, wait a minute, this is way better than what we usually get. Let's just stay right here and fall asleep. And even after the first lesson, I have students come back and report they're shocked. They woke up in the morning, they were in the same position they went to sleep in. They've never been able to sleep on their back, etc., etc. So this is how we introduce our things. It's we introduce something comfortable, it's seductive, the brain likes it. It's not getting all these complaints from the nuts and bolts of the body saying, do something, toss, turn, find us something better. And then we toss and turn and we don't necessarily find anything better.
Yeah.
And some people toss and turn all night, which is so sad.
But that makes a lot of sense, because if you can do this for 8 hours every single day.
Big result, right?
Big result. Probably the biggest, actually, right? Because when else will you be 8 hours in one position?
I don't know that I want to have a favorite child. All of these techniques are so powerful. If you bend wrong, that's much later in the trip, because you first have to have all of the structure, the length. So then after that, we like for people to create more strength through their torso, because most people's torso is way too wobbly.
Mm-hmm. So build muscles, basically.
Build muscles, but particular muscles.
Yeah.
The deeper abdominal muscles, 3 layers. Okay. Not the rectus abdominis, not the 6-pack muscle. That's the one people emphasize the most, and they do crunches. And I tell my students crunches are well named. They crunch your discs and they crunch your nerves, and they're not a good exercise. The Canadian Army has thrown them out. They're illegal. The US Army, if you have a back problem, you're not allowed to do crunches. But in the lay population, it's the most common ab workout people do. And it's a really not good one. It's like most people have somewhat frayed, worn, and torn discs. And now you're putting this kind of pressure on your discs with each crunch. And that's the worst possible direction to be distorting your discs, because you're putting pressure on the front. Discs are a mechanical device. It's a shock absorber, basically. And it has fibrous exterior layers and it has a filling. And if you keep putting pressure on the front, then you're pushing the contents back and wearing the back layers. And it's right behind the disc that you have your nerve roots and your spinal cord. And this is not the direction you want to be fooling around in. So I think crunches are really not a good exercise. You want to do more isometric things. But again, the way we teach strengthening the abs is on the job. So we have a technique we call the inner corset. And that, it's very precise. It's the 3 deeper layers of abdominal muscles, the deepest back muscles, and all together they form a kind of corset. It's kind of a brace. And it's like a party balloon. When you squeeze a party balloon, it makes for a slender, taller balloon. So that's what you want to do with your torso. You want to squeeze yourself to be slenderer and therefore taller. I mean, the stuff has to go somewhere.
So it's kind of the muscles left and right, basically, if I understand it correctly.
They're all over.
Okay.
So they go this way. The external obliques are this way. Yeah. The internal obliques are this way. And the transverses are transverse. And all those 3 layers, they're like very thin strips of leather all joined together. And they form a kind of brace. So it's a little bit like, what people at Home Depot wear when they're going to carry heavy loads. They make themselves slenderer, taller, and then you're easing apart your vertebrae. So you're much safer. It's what anyone wants to do when their spine is going to be threatened. So if you are carrying heavy suitcases, if you're going to be running and there's impact, if you're in a bumpy bus, if you're going to be twisting or distorting your spine in some way, playing golf, tennis, any sport, really, moving around in different directions, you better brace yourself first. I don't like this word brace because people do all kinds of things and call it bracing, and a lot of rectus abdominis involvement where they tuck the pelvis. So if you look at the muscle builders, that iconic stance where they're tucking their pelvis and they're rounding their shoulders, and it looks very macho, but it's very unhealthy. Every disc is suffering, really. And they've got enough muscle on them that they can get away. It postpones problems. But there really isn't a good substitute for alignment. Good alignment helps everything, including muscle building and such. And so, so we teach this inner corset, and we teach slenderizing and lengthening the back and stabilizing it.
But so in simple terms, try to have kind of a strong core without crunches. You hate crunches, I got
and
that.
I don't like this word core because I would have liked to use core. But what it's been used to mean includes a lot of rectus abdominis, a lot of tucking of the pelvis. And what I'm trying to describe is less rectus abdominis involvement, 3 deeper layers. So you still maintain your J spine. You're not like making an I spine out of your S or J or C or whatever it is you're starting with.
And basically the logic is be strong here, whatever you want to call it.
Be strong around your torso. Yeah. Squeeze it thinner and taller to make your discs, your lumbar discs especially, safe.
And if I don't do crunches, like which exercise will I do for that?
So isometric exercises of all kinds are particularly good. So, planks or side planks or that. And then you're dissecting. Then you're doing some component, the internal obliques or the external obliques or so. But my favorite exercise is what I was just describing, which is that inner corset done on the job.
Yeah.
Anytime you are doing something difficult for your spine, carrying something, and all of us carry things. We carry the groceries, we carry our babies, we carry stuff. And if you're doing a weight lifting routine, you're carrying weights, that's the time to do extra inner corset. And, people are showing up weaker and weaker. And I used to say that the inner corset is something you only have to do when you're extra challenged in your spine. And now I say do 10 or 20% all the time, because most people are weak in these deep abdominal and deep back muscles. So to make up for that lack of tone, I've started advising people do a little bit whenever they can remember to do it, and then more when their backs are challenged.
Okay, so now we already have 3, I think, very practical steps. What would your fourth best child be if
So
we
now we
put it
start
that way?
start to remodel the spine. This is where we are ready to get the behind. And so there are many techniques. So when you're stretch lying on the side, it reinforces this traction and length and gives people an additional comfortable and therapeutic way to sleep.
What about hanging, actually? If you hang?
Hanging is wonderful, but how many minutes a day is someone going to hang? That's the problem with all those special things. It's good to front load this effort with a little bit of hanging, although some people have problematic shoulders, and the older crowd sometimes has brittle bones in there, and even hanging can actually put too much stress on certain vertebrae. And so partial hanging is usually available to most people, but and we do recommend it, but think about how much more stretch you can get lying all stretched out in your bed and stretched out against a backrest. And even the inner corset is a way of getting stretch and traction in your spine. So then we go on to remodeling and the spine, and that we do by sitting away from a backrest. That's where you really need your behind to get the rest of the stack to have a chance of being upright and relaxed.
And remodeling means going from C shape or S shape to the J.
Yes,
shape,
or
right?
I shape. Sometimes older people have been tucking and they sort of melted into themselves without excessive curves forming anywhere. That's another shape we see sometimes. So whichever way people start, we try to draw them out and reshape them into this modern calligraphy J shape.
And then this is very individual, or is there like, I don't know, do this, and that, and you're going to get 80% of the results?
It's more like 80% of the population can do this, and that, and will get good results. And then 20% of the population needs modification. And, depending on their history, like they might have a herniated disc someplace. You have to be careful. They need a little, the order in which you do things becomes even more important. And so to get the behind, we use stack sitting, we use stretch lying on the side, and most importantly, we use walking, glide walking, I call it. Glide walking is just natural walking. Stack sitting is just natural sitting, but it's become rare enough that I decided it merits a name. And so I made these names up, hoping that they would catch on and become common currency. And I would say one of them has hip hinging. I made that name up. So when I wrote my book, I had very boring chapter titles: sitting against a backrest, sitting away from a backrest. And I thought, oh, so boring. And so in one day I decided, no, this needs to be much juicier. And so I managed to make all those names up, and some of them have stuck with have really traveled afar. And hip hinging, I think, has done the most travel.
But so basically, the best way to kind of reform or reshape your spine is to walk in the
Walking
proper
well
way.
does all kinds of magic. With
Yeah.
every stride, you can be stretching your psoas.
Yeah.
Once you got your upper torso all nicely firmed up. Yeah, otherwise you are in danger. The better you walk, the more you use your glutes, the longer you leave your heel on the ground, the more you are in danger of arching your back with every step. So you first have to learn to firm it up.
Yeah.
And then walking does magic. Every stride does all kinds of exercises for you. No time taken out of your day. You can tone your glutes with every stride. You can stretch your psoas. You're stretching your calf. Then you work out your calf because you want to flick your foot. You're flicking your leg from the back position to the front position. That uses the calf muscles. It uses all the foot muscles. So you're getting this major workout. The English have it right. Like they look to the daily constitutional as a very comprehensive exercise. And I think they're right if you do it skillfully.
And if you have to put it into words, how should one walk? Can you put this into words, or is this more
I can tell you a few
shown?
characteristics.
Yeah.
You don't want to be lurching forward and breaking every fall by sticking out your leg. And landing, you don't want to be landing heavily. That's like a little earthquake for every weight-bearing joint.
Yeah.
Not healthy. So it has to be a controlled forward propulsion. And there's a whole cascade of events that needs to happen in the glutes. And then there are brakes on landing so that you're landing like a hunter-gatherer. It's like it stands to reason, right? That we were built to land very softly. If our hunter-gatherer ancestors had been, announcing their arrival with every stride to all the predators and the prey around, we wouldn't even be here. So it's clear just from these commonsensical arguments that we had to be walking very gently on the earth. We had to be arriving very gently with every step. And there are muscular patterns that do just that. And we're lucky that we still have some modern hunter-gatherers, that we can learn from. Yeah, it's called midfield archaeology. I took an archaeology course at Stanford and learned this principle that by observing modern-day hunter-gatherers, you can make pretty good deductions about how our ancestors lived.
Of course.
Right? And so we can still learn these techniques of how you arrive in every stride. And it has to be gentle. It has to be, and we're not so concerned about predators and prey anymore, but we absolutely are concerned about arthritic changes in our every weight-bearing joint. People get arthritic hips and arthritic knees and arthritic spines and necks and feet. And those don't serve us well. And I think it's because we've put our nuts and bolts in a random kind of arrangement. And now on top of that, we're landing heavily with every step. Most people do. You want to be soundless in your landing. So that's a decent summary view, I think.
So I'm trying to summarize now in my own head. So basically, try to stretch yourself, either sitting or lying, right?
Yes.
And ideally, you can kind of really do that properly.
Yes.
And that kind of solves the problem. Okay, how am I going to work, right? Because you often sit.
That's one very effective way to work. Now, sometimes people feel like, wait a minute, I'm all the way back against my backrest. Well, you just bring your keyboard close in. And for beginners, that's what I recommend because stack sitting is harder to learn.
Yeah.
Comes later.
So this is kind of the first of that. It's very practical. I can try to do this literally tomorrow, the next time I sit, right?
True.
And then the second thing is really this kind of glide walking. I think you put it very eloquently.
firming up first.
Firming up first,
Yeah.
yes, and then the walking.
Then glide walking is the most effective way to get your behind and
Yeah.
start creating this hook of the J spine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you want to, and then the fourth project would be you take your newly lengthened, strengthened, remodeled spine into everything you do. Bending, dancing, working out, etc., gardening, whatever.
So you try to be mindful about your J spine and try to keep it that way, basically.
Well, it's asking a lot to be mindful all the time. In the beginning, you'd certainly need to be mindful, but what you're trying to do is create new habits.
Yeah.
And it's not as hard as people might think. We're not teaching random things. We're teaching natural things. Even if it feels awkward in the beginning, it feels strange, it feels strangely familiar. Yeah, there's a sweet spot feeling. So it's not as hard as learning something random. You're going back to what you used to do when you were 2 years old. You're going back to what your ancestors did. It's written in your genes to move around this way. And so it's very learnable.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can imagine how it should look, when you sit, when you lay, when you try to do this, when you try to walk. But I wonder, for the listeners here, what is the best way to learn this? Is it really kind of looking at it in your book, or do you have videos of that? Because I'm a very visual learner, like with movement. Like, can I go on YouTube and figure this out?
It is a very visual thing. We have free workshops regularly. So 1 hour long. And if you're so lucky as to have a teacher in your neighborhood, they give these free workshops to the public. And that gives a good idea of how this works. And we stand people up and walk them through walking, right? A little bit. So they have a taste of it. And we use images because a picture really is worth 1,000 words sometimes.
Yeah.
And with posture, that's true. So that is a good way. The free workshop is probably the best way to begin. The book is very comprehensive, but it's hard to learn a kinesthetic thing from a book. It's like how many good tennis players or golfers do you know who learned from a book?
0, I think.
It's hard.
It's very hard, yeah.
As every now and then someone comes and surprises me, like they really studied hard or they formed a study group and learned surprisingly much. But most people have a hard time. The first couple of things, stretch sitting, stretch lying, those they usually get in a decent way. They're good enough that we've put out video clips on how to do this because they get it at least right enough, they're not doing damage.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, it helps to have a coach.
Yeah. It's funny because it's similar with meditation, Before, I've been meditating, 4 or 5 or 6 years. And before I was trying to do it kind of alone. And then the second you kind of really have someone physically show you what they're doing and how they're doing it, it's like a whole new perspective on it, And it seems like it's the same here. Of course, you can try to, read it. You can try to look at it on a video, but probably the best is really if you have a human correcting your kind of faulty behavior sometimes,
Yeah. I'm surprised that you say that about meditation. Having someone's spirit right there, it's encouraging and so on. But postures, kinesthetic, walking, bending, those are hard to describe. I tried very hard. My book has over 1,100 images and step-by-step photographs and directions. But it's non-trivial to have the discipline to follow all those instructions. So it works very well as a workbook.
Yeah, because I feel like and I didn't find this, maybe it exists, but I tried to find it on YouTube, the proper movements, and I didn't really find what we're talking about right now, because what we're speaking of right now is very approachable, literally anyone could do it. And I feel like if you could try to break it down in a YouTube series, 5 minutes, 10 minutes each,
We have certain things on YouTube and on our website that work. Yeah. But some of it is very nuanced. And it's very possible. And, we have built our reputation in fixing back problems, right? More than helping people improve their posture. So people are coming with herniated discs. They're coming after they've had 3 back surgeries and have lost hope, and then they find us. So we have to be a little circumspect in what we put out there. Don't want to land someone in the emergency room,
Yeah, of
which,
course.
some of these things done poorly, done out of order, could land people in trouble.
Yeah, because that's what I saw online. Really, the comments under every single YouTube video, they're so positive. Like they're almost like too positive, but they're all, very personalized, like with stories of, hey, I did it this way and it really helped me. And then the other person, hey, I did that and it really helped me. And it was really quite surprising, to kind of that you were able to have this community really leaving these testimonials, and it was that was really literally the reason why I reached out. I saw these comments and I was like, wow, this sounds too good to be true. Like, what are they doing? I want to learn that.
We suffer a little bit from sounding too good to be true. Yeah, we have to actually hide a lot of the benefits because otherwise it easily sounds too good. Posture, it turns out, sits right on the fence between physical and physiological and mental and emotional. It's right at that juncture. So the benefits are very far reaching. And there's increasing research coming out showing, for example, that it's harder to be depressed when you have open upper body posture. It's harder to be anxious. So they've done, there's a 2017 New Zealand study, an fMRI study, where they're looking for brain prints after showing subjects anxiety-provoking images. And it turns out that when you have rounded shoulders and hunched postures, those people get anxious much more easily than when we have the posture I teach. And there's very interesting research, and it's not so shocking because if we think about animals, how do we know how they're feeling? It's through their posture. When a dog puts its tail between its legs, that's a sad dog, a submissive dog. His head is hung and so on. And yet, human animals are doing exactly that all day long. And I'm very interested in the emotional health benefits associated with posture. It's not where we've built our reputation. So we hear comments on the side, our focus is on nuts and bolts and teaching people how to create a well-structured house, I think of it as. People spend a lot of time decorating their house and making it prettier, and the same with the bodies, kind of all kinds of cosmetic things that people do, but they neglect the structure. And if the structure is faulty, then all those little decorations don't come too much. So, yeah, it's a huge thing to have a sturdy architecture. It informs the breathing, the elimination, the mood, certainly the nuts and bolts and pains and inflammations.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we're missing right now in this discussion? Because right now I feel like we kind of went through the 3 or 4 or 5 things that are, well, anyone could do it. We also explained where to get more information. If the one is there like a thing that is still missing? Would you say this is like a good holistic overview to kind of introduce this topic?
Well, I think, a discerning person is going to want to know about the evidence for this actually working. Like you have noted, we have a crazy amount of positive goodwill that has built around it. Our anecdotal evidence comes out of our ears. But there are some higher level pieces of evidence that are important for people to know about. So, for example, there is a crowdsourcing website called healthoutcome.org. And they spent a couple of $1 million on Facebook ads in the time to see what people have done for them. They said, do you have back pain? Do you have share your experience and learn from others? And the guy was a statistician and prides himself on extracting a huge amount of data from his recruits. And there are like 40 some interventions that were rated, and we are the number one rated intervention, and not by a small margin, by a huge margin. And he was selling his own exercise regimen, so it was not at all in his interest.
Nobody wanted to hear.
Showcase as being so dominantly a front runner.
Yes.
And, because his website went under after a while, but, he was honest with reporting the data. And so that was a very nice piece of data. And we've done internal surveys, and like 86% of our students that take our online course, which by the way is like 18 lessons done in little 13-minute snippets. You learn just one little thing and get to practice it. Good for behavior change. And 86% of those people report improved function. So we have something special going on. It attracted the chief of physical medicine and rehab at Stanford. He is doing a randomized controlled trial comparing the Gokhale method with physical therapy for lower back pain. So this is extremely exciting because that is the gold standard for proving something works in medicine. And this is now reconsidered an educational intervention, but back pain is certainly a medical quandary in modern times. So he really liked not only that we seem to be noteworthy in our results, but also he liked that we've invented a wearable, a 5-sensor device that we put on people's spines and take baseline measurements of what the shape of their spine is when they're sitting, standing, bending, etc. And then we follow up after their training, and we've published results on the change in people's spinal shapes. So, and there is a change. And so not only are we upending this huge problem in modern medicine that nothing works for appreciably for back pain, but also we're pointing towards what the underlying cause for these benefits is, that we are actually helping people change the shape of their spine. So that's two problems solved. The more important problem is that we're actually helping people get over their back pain. But it's also very interesting to a researcher that there's some underlying principle that's understandable because, it's like people there are a few interventions that help a little bit, but then nobody understands why. It's like, okay, there was some subluxation, or there was, people don't really understand these things. And this is very understandable, shape and spine.
Well, for me, if I have, 10 people telling me, hey, this really works, and it's literally a non-invasive method,
yes,
I'm going to give it a try. If I'm suffering.
That's plain smart.
Easy.
People should have different standards for non-invasive than they do for invasive.
Absolutely.
If you're talking 10 people told you about back surgery, you still want to investigate.
Yeah.
What's the data?
Yeah.
But improving your posture?
Yeah.
What's the problem with that?
Nothing. And of course, kind of the medical kind of industry isn't very happy about it because, as we know, the people are much happier kind of fixing your issues and then keeping you sick, kind of in a subscription model than actually fixing it.
Individual doctors, in my experience, never work that way. No. These people came to this profession because they care about helping people. It's a heck of a lot of hard work. If you had only mercenary goals, you pick something else.
Yeah. You can make more money somewhere else, I guess.
For sure.
Yeah.
This is a hard way to make money, and it's increasingly so. No, people are, and in fact, doctors are who send us most of our students right now.
Yeah.
No, we've had 500 doctors take our course. No, doctors are our friends. Like, it's, general practitioners, they have a pain point. They have patients coming to them, and then they refer them here and there and everywhere, and then those patients come back with the same problem. Now what are they going to do? That's not a happy patient, and they don't have stuff to give them. And so they're very happy when they find us and it actually works.
Yeah, and it sounds like, when I think about it, it doesn't sound like a lot of work. It sounds
Not
like
a lot of work. It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of time. It's not a lot of bandwidth. It's not a heroic measure. It's not like, okay, I'm going to fix my posture. It's on and off, paying attention through the day.
Yeah.
But we break it down into very, very bite-sized pieces. It's manageable. People can do it. Everybody can do this.
And there's actually like a free offline kind of course or seminar.
Offline and online.
And online.
Yeah, so anyone from anywhere can just join 1 hour. If you sacrifice 1 hour of your life,
I think you can do that.
You might just change the course of your well-being.
I think people have spent 1 hour much worse than that. Actually, maybe to wrap things off, because I feel like now we've been talking a lot about the mechanical kind of measures, what can we do and where to get more and so on. Could you maybe end on the personal story, how you actually got here and how we ended up here and what happened, what didn't happen, what helped you and so on?
Well, like most people who develop passions, I came at it the hard way. I had a severe back problem, L5-S1, huge herniation in my 9th month of pregnancy with my first child. And first they thought, oh, maybe the baby's sitting on a nerve root. After the delivery, it'll be better. It wasn't better. It was worse and worse, and I couldn't carry my baby, and I couldn't even carry a cooking pot without feeling sciatic twinges, and I couldn't sleep through the night. That was the worst. Every 2 hours. I didn't want to take pain meds because I was nursing my baby. So I'd wake up every 2 hours, and I'd kind of hobble around and get out of severe back spasm and then repeat the cycle. Horrible. And I had been trying everything. First, the conservative things, physical therapy, stretching, strengthening, the alternative things, chiropractic, acupuncture, me checking my head. Was it an attitude? You start second guessing yourself, right? And yoga and all kinds of stuff. Nothing working. And so I had surgery, which, I was that's not my first go-to, but I was desperate. And it did help, but a year later, I had the same problem all over again. Same disc, re-herniated. And now they're offering me another surgery. And multiple surgeries does not bode well. If you're in your mid-20s having multiple back surgeries, what are your 60s going to look like? Well, I've been lucky because I cast a wider and wider net. And long story short, by doing the things that are in my book and that we teach in our courses, I got completely out of back pain. I never needed that second surgery. I went on to have 2 more kids, which I had decided I was not going to do because of the agony. It was like an ice pick in my butt, like horrible. And so now I'm 65. I just turned 65 this week. And I think I've avoided a whole bunch of problems that would have been with me by now. Neck and the usual collection, of knees and hips. And I don't have any problems. And it's wonderful. And I have more energy than I've had in my 30s. And so now I get to pass it on, which is an enormous privilege and pleasure. It doesn't get old. Seeing the delight of people who have their lives back, it doesn't get better.
Mm-hmm. Well, honestly, sign me up because it's really it's a topic that is on my mind. It's a topic that I don't know. I'm trying very hard with standing desks, with lots of sports, with sometimes no sports, split testing, what works, what doesn't. And if you could show me this now, kind of off camera, that would be lovely. Really.
I will do that.
That would be lovely. So it's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming on the show.
you for coming all this way and helping me get my word out there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.